The biosphere and energy. An enormous amount of energy reaches the Earth from the sun, and plants can convert solar energy into chemical energy in the form of food. Photosynthesis is a process that changes solar energy into chemical energy. And this happens because of a pigment that is found in all plants. This pigment is called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a pigment that gives leaves their green color. The chemical formula for photosynthesis is as follows. We start with reactants. These are the starting materials. And we end up with products. These are the end materials. The starting materials for photosynthesis are carbon dioxide, CO2, water, H2O, and light energy. The products, what is produced inside the cells of plants, are two products or end materials. The first is glucose, C6H12O6, and the second is oxygen, O2. There are numbers in front of some of the molecules involved in this chemical reaction. This shows how many molecules of each compound are required. For example, we need 6 carbon dioxides to react with 6 waters, and they will produce 1 glucose and 6 oxygen. In this diagram, we see the sun providing energy. This derives a chemical reaction. Carbon dioxide enters the leaves from the atmosphere, and oxygen is released as a product of photosynthesis. In the meantime, glucose is made inside the leaf, and glucose is a molecule that is used as a source of energy or food. So, carbon dioxide and light make glucose and release oxygen. We also get the water inside the plants from the soil. Please remember what the starting materials, the reactants, and the end materials, the products are for photosynthesis. Energy travels in ecosystems from one organism to another based on their feeding relationships. A food chain is a way of showing feeding relationships among organisms. They always start with a producer. The producer is an organism that can make its own food. And they end with a final consumer. In this case, the producer is the algae. The algae is eaten by the water flea. The water flea is eaten by the damselfly or damsel nymph because it's a baby. And the damsel nymph is eaten by the frog. A food web is a diagram showing interconnected food chains in an entire ecosystem. So let's take a look at an ecosystem that contains the white spruce, the bog birch, and the bunchberry as plants. These plants are eaten by squirrels, sprouse, snowshoe hare, beetles, and even moose. These are the primary consumers, or the primary producers rather. This entire first row of photosynthesizing organisms or plants are called primary producers. The rest of the organisms can't produce their own food through photosynthesis, so they're called consumers. You can make out single individual food chains from a food web by following the path starting from the primary producer all the way to the top consumer. In this case, we've created a food chain with 1, 2, 3, 4 organisms by following the arrows from beginning to end. This food chain consists of the white spruce, the red squirrel, the red fox, and the Canadian lynx. There are many different possible food chains that can be created from one single food web. The different levels in a food chain are called trophic levels. A trophic level is a category of organism that has defined how the organisms gain their energy. The first trophic level consists of the primary producers. The second trophic level consists of primary consumers. Primary consumers eat only plants. We call them herbivores. Herbivores are eaten by secondary consumers. Secondary consumers are organisms that eat other animals. This is the third trophic level, and we call these organisms carnivores. The fourth trophic level, these are called the tertiary consumers. Tertiary consumers are organisms that eat secondary consumers. We call these the top carnivores. Then we have organisms that eat dead or decaying animals, and we call them decomposers. If we were to take the total mass of a living organism in a group or area, it would be defined as a biomass. If we were to take the total living mass of an organism and pile it up into different trophic levels, we would create what is called a food pyramid. Here is a food pyramid. If you notice, the bottom of the food pyramid has the most amount of biomass and the most amount of energy. This belongs to the position of the primary consumers. Next, we have the second largest, which is the primary consumers, also known as herbivores. The third is the secondary consumers, also known as carnivores, and the top is the top carnivores. So if you notice, a few things happen. As you move up a food chain, the amount of biomass decreases. So there are way more plants than there are top carnivores. I want you to take a look at the energy that's available as well. That's something that we will talk about when we discuss trophic levels. In the primary producers, the largest base of this pyramid, there are 1,000 units of energy. In the second trophic level, there are only 100 units of energy. In the third, 10, and in the fourth, there are only 1. There's a mathematical relationship between these numbers and the amount of energy that is available as you move from one trophic level to the next. This is called trophic efficiency. Trophic efficiency can be summarized by the 10% rule. Only 10% of the energy from a trophic level is available to organisms at the next level. If you look at the first trophic level, you'll notice that there are 10,000 joules of energy. When we move to the second trophic level, there are only 1,000 joules of energy available. It's as if we divided the amount of energy available in the level below by 10. This same pattern occurs every time you move up a trophic level. The amount of energy that's available is only 10% of the energy available at the level below. This is called the 10% rule. Why do we only have 10% available? Well, the reason why is because there's loss in energy. Some of these herbivores, organisms that eat other plants, they may not eat the entire part of a plant. They may only eat the fruit or the leaves. Not everything they eat is digested, and sometimes energy is lost in the form of heat from the bodies of the organisms when carrying out their life functions. If you want to calculate the amount of energy available from trophic level 1 to every other trophic level, all you have to do is divide by 10. So if we have 5,467 joules available at the first trophic level, then there will be 546 joules available at the second trophic level. Let's try to find out how much energy is available at the third trophic level. To do that, we will take 546.7 and divide it by 10. Punch this into your calculator. See what you get. You should get 54.67 joules of energy. Let's find out how much energy is available when we go from the third trophic level to the fourth trophic level. And for this, again, we will divide by 10. Try this in your calculator and see what you get. If we do this, we get 5.467 joules of energy. Another way to look at it is to move the decimal place over one spot to the left every time you go down a trophic level. So here, we will move the decimal place one spot to the left, and it becomes 546.7. Here, if we move the decimal place one spot to the left, it becomes 54.67. Here, if we move the decimal place one spot to the left, it becomes 5.467. Please be sure to finish this activity below. We're going to take a moment to talk about bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Bioaccumulation is a process by which materials, especially toxins, are ingested by an organism at a greater rate than they are eliminated. So these toxins are accumulating inside the bodies of different organisms. Now, the amount of toxins that are inside or have accumulated inside an organism depends on where they are in a trophic level. The higher up you move in trophic levels, there will be an increase in the concentration of toxins. So biomagnification is the process by which there is an increase in the concentration of toxins as you move from one trophic level to another. For example, if you have large fish in an ecosystem, these large fish eat smaller fish. And these smaller fish eat plants. If the plants accumulate toxins from their environment, these toxins will appear inside the fish. And if larger fish eat lots of small fish, then their concentration of toxins will be the highest because they are higher up in an ecosystem and therefore have a higher concentration of toxins. There are examples of bioaccumulation that are found inside nature. Some are good and some are bad. For example, the monarch butterfly. The beautiful orange butterfly hides a secret inside its tissues, and it lies in the fact that it is an orange organism. This orange should be a warning to any organism that tries to eat it or attack it, because the monarch butterfly is poisonous. And the reason why it's poisonous is because it ingests a plant called milkweed. These monarch butterflies don't make their own poison, they get it from the milkweed. And these toxins, these poisons, are stored inside the tissues of the organisms, and they don't harm the monarch butterfly itself. But it works to the advantage of the butterfly because it prevents other organisms from eating it. Now here's an example of accumulation or bioaccumulation that is bad. And it comes with a chemical called DDT, or dichlorodyphenyl trichloroethane. DDT is an agricultural insecticide that was once used in North America. When DDT entered the environment in runoff from land, it was absorbed by the algae in the water. Microscopic organisms ate the algae, and small fish ate the microscopic organisms. So at each trophic level, the concentration of DDTs in the tissue of the organisms increased. This is called biomagnification. At high concentrations, the DDT affected the reproduction of large fish-eating birds. These large birds were no longer to produce eggs and no longer, therefore, to produce any offspring. It wasn't until the 1970s, when there was a ban on DDT, that the populations of DDT-vulnerable birds slowly started to increase in Canada. Another example of bioaccumulation that has negatively affected the environment are PCBs, or polychlorinated biphenyls. These molecules are used by industry, or I should say were used by industry. It was found that when they entered the water, air, and soil, when they were being disposed of, they were being absorbed by organisms in the environment, and this especially affected peregrine falcons. Peregrine falcons are birds that are at the top of the food chain, highest up on the trophic level, and they were brought back from the brink of extinction once they banned PCBs. Here's a diagram that shows the concentration of toxins that enter from the producer all the way up to the top consumer. And you can see this number starts to get bigger. It is amplified or magnified as you move throughout the food chain. So plants get their energy. They make their own energy in a process called photosynthesis. But how do other animals in the ecosystems get their energy? They get it from a form of glucose that they receive from plants. How do we turn glucose into usable energy? Well, it's a process called cellular respiration. All organisms get their energy from glucose. For organisms to release and use the energy, it must be broken down, and cellular respiration is the most common and efficient method for extracting energy from glucose. So here's the chemical formula for cellular respiration. Some of these molecules should be familiar to you. In fact, you have seen all of them before. We're going to look at the starting materials or reactants of cellular respiration. The first is glucose. Glucose is C6H12O6. And the second is oxygen, O2. These are the starting materials or reactants. These starting materials are used to produce three end materials or products. The first is carbon dioxide. The second is water. And the third is energy. It's your responsibility to know the chemical formula for cellular respiration and be able to identify the starting materials or reactants and the end materials or products. If you notice, this is the process of photosynthesis, but in reverse. We have all of the same substances, but they're just in the opposite direction. So, the reactants of cellular respiration are the end materials of photosynthesis. And the end materials or products of cellular respiration were the starting materials for for photosynthesis rather. Photosynthesis and cellular respiration are interconnected, and we can look at this diagram to show how they are interconnected. Photosynthesis uses carbon dioxide. Cellular respiration releases carbon dioxide. So this carbon dioxide forms an interconnection. The carbon dioxide released in cellular respiration is used by plants in photosynthesis. Plants release oxygen in photosynthesis, and this oxygen is used in cellular respiration. So we say that the two processes, photosynthesis and cellular respiration, are complementary processes. Take some time to copy this down. You'll be asked to describe how the process of photosynthesis and cellular respiration are interconnected, or how the two processes are complementary. Please take your time to answer the following questions below and any LMS activities that you have been assigned.